Hello and welcome to Film 2251, The Art of Adaptation. And this is going to be the first lecture, and it's basically an introduction to the main topics that we're going to cover in this course. So, we're going to talk about today why studying adaptations. And I should say that actually, in academic settings, there was like a resistance for a long period of time with regards to adaptation studies. And it's because usually a literary work is considered as superior, a high culture art, than movies as just entertainment for the masses. You usually hear that expression that the movie is not as good as the book. So, however, adaptation is an important element of film culture and film industry. Filmmakers do like to adapt from the stories because they see something valuable in that transition from words to image. They think that something in the book is visual. Filmmakers always were interested in adapting the great works of literature for two reasons: for artistic reasons, obviously, but also for economical reasons. They believe that a work that already is popular in another media art form, the work that is familiar to the audiences and critics, has a better chance to attract a large number of audiences into theater. For example, Lion King is known as Disney's adaptation of Shakespeare's Hamlet, or Bridget Jones' Diary is known to be adaptations of Pride and Prejudice into a contemporary setting familiar to teenage audiences. Usually, the scholars of literature protest too much the idea of adaptations of great novels for different reasons, saying that if something is really, really good in one media art form, it cannot be translated into another media art form. Literature, usually in our culture, is known as a prestigious high art, and movies just popular forms of entertainment, commercial thing. How can a movie be better than a book? So actually, down here, I actually talked about a Freudian thesis and the idea of fidelity complex. I say Freudian thesis because there's some sort of a kind of a father and son relationship between the original text and the adapted version. The original text carries the name of the father. So in our culture, you cannot kill your father and create something entirely new. It's a taboo. However, if you totally follow and respect the original text, so without any creative freedom, recreate the text into the movie using like voiceover narrations of the passages of the book, it would be considered as something very passive. You're just obeying the father without any sense of creativity. And in that sense, literary scholars look for some sort of a magical balance. Second reason is that cinema is a temporal medium. In a way, it's limited in its temporality. It is assumed that in literature we don't have that limitation, and writers can build up details. So a chapter can be just about one moment. All those things, that 100 pages, should be translated in a movie in one scene through mise en scène and set designs. And usually people do not pay attention to the visual language of the movies, they watch them passively. So, for that reason, it is usually known that certain detailed explanations in the book never realized in movie viewing. A long book like War and Peace is adapted in movies and it should be like about 2 hours. So the nature of condensing involves losing some materials, and that's another reason for protesting too much against the adaptation, because there's always something that is missing. A movie cannot develop all essential um, elements of the novel. The novel gives many layers, but films maybe is one-dimensional. So a good scene in a film usually propels the narrative. At the same time, it reveals something about the characters and explores the main themes of the movie. However, in a novel, one scene or just an entire chapter may concentrate on only one aspects of the story. So, for such reasons, the traditional language of adaptation criticism is connected with certain extremely judgmental terms, such as infidelity, unfaithfulness, betrayal, deformation, violations of the original text. And I think to study adaptations, we need to find alternative terms. An adaptation can still be unsuccessful or successful. A movie like Revolutionary Road, as a fan of the novel, I think that there is a subversive representations of gender relations and criticism of masculinity evident in the original book. But the adaptation by Sam Mendes failed to realize that aspect of the novel and offers a very sort of masculinist view of the relationship between the characters. So in a way, I think that the movie was not really a successful adaptation. But the whole thing is that to discuss adapted works, we need to find better dialogues between the original text and the adapted version. So we should know that, of course, something is always missing. That's the nature of the medium. So we should focus on what cinematic elements were added, certain things that couldn't be developed or be experienced by the readers with that energy. So, how a movie may add something valuable to the way we digest the central themes of the original text. In short, movies and novels express themselves in different ways. Fiction usually uses words to tell stories and also describing the characters. However, movies strictly dependent on image and action. So they're essentially different medium that resist each other as often as they communicate with each other and cooperate. But we should know that films are powerful. They can move us into tears, they can scare us. They sometimes are presented like nightmares. So films can have such an imminent impact on us. So in their process of revisions of the old text, they always find new ways of impressions. The reading assigned today is discussing the idea of adaptation in relation with cultural appropriation, believing that the process of adaptation always involves some sort of cultural appropriation. And for that reason, it should be discussed in an interdisciplinary frameworks because we're talking about different media art forms, and none of it should be prioritize against the other one. There are transnational aspects. There is this sort of trans media relationship between the text. So it's a sort of polyphonic dialogue between two works of art. And although we always say that an original text, we should know that the process of adaptation always requires some sort of reinterpretation and recreation of the original work. And it's not always just one way from literature to movies. Actually, there is a novel that was inspired by Citizen Kane. So you never know that it's actually a myth that it's always the adaptation always is taking place from one medium to another. For example, movies to video games. Actually, recently we can see a number of films that are inspired by video games, for example. So we always study a work in relation to another work in adaptation studies. Not that, I mean, you can talk about a movie on its own, but what I mean, like for a course like this, when it's the subject of our study is adaptation. So in that sense, you always need to take that interdisciplinary approach in the study of the text. And again, instead of using the ideas such as fidelity, we should think of how a movie adjusts and alters and appropriates the original text in this process of adaptation. One should also know that from the beginning of the 20th century, novels are becoming more cinematic. It seems that they are learning from cinematic techniques. So, despite that intellectual hostility between literature and cinema, it is undeniable how much the two corresponds with each other. So for this week, the movie that we're going to watch is called Adaptation. So this week we don't have actually any original text that you should read, so you can just read the reading and look at the PowerPoints. They're actually represented here and watch the movie. So in class on Wednesday, we are going to talk about the course outline, and after that, we are going to discuss the movie adaptation in relation with the reading and theories discussed. Thank you.